All right, good morning, everyone. I believe I let everyone in from the waiting room. So, welcome back to our open research office. This morning, our session is titled Resources for Open Data Sharing, Dryad, the DMP tool, and the NIH data sharing. You can ask any questions that you have during the session. You can either unmute yourself, raise your hand, put it in the chat. I'll be watching, and Jocelyn, you can get started. You're muted.
Thank you. I clicked it and it didn't go. Thank you so much. All right, let me just get my slides up and we'll get started here. All right. All right, you should be able to see my slides now.
Yes.
Perfect. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Jocelyn Swick-Jemison, and I am the Data Services Librarian here at UB. I work out of the Health Sciences Library at Abbott Hall. But I am here to serve anybody on campus with research data management needs. So today we're going to talk about the NIH data sharing requirements, ORCID, Dryad, and the DMPTool. Basically a suite of tools that are available for you that I will help support here at UB to fulfill your data sharing requirements and goals. And like Marshall said, please feel free to put any questions in the chat. Raise your hand, unmute, and interrupt me as needed. I'm going to be going over several different tools, so I understand if you don't want to wait till the end, but that's also fine too. All right, so just a little bit of the history of the NIH data sharing policy. It goes back to 2003, where all grants over $500,000 had to submit a data sharing plan. And then they continued with the genomic data sharing policy. So those of you who collect genomic data on NIH grants will be familiar with this process already. And then they started looking into requirements to share all data. The initial thought was we would just have people share their data when it's from a really big grant. And then it was decided, no, anything that is funded by the NIH, therefore meaning it's funded by the American people, that data should be shared publicly. So much like the Nelson memo that states that you also have to share the articles that you produce from the data, you also have to share your research data, anything collected using NIH funds. All right, and then this is currently where we are. This is the policy effective January 25th, 2023. So we're 3 years into this now, which again, requires that any data collected using NIH money must be shared publicly. All right, so why is data management and sharing important? So it's required for reproducibility. In order for other researchers to validate your science and your findings, they need to be able to see your data. They need to be able to, your data has to be robustly documented so that they can actually reproduce the findings that you had and potentially build on it, right? Use it as a foundation for the next experiment. It facilitates data reuse and it helps make data FAIR, which is an acronym for findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable. This is the goal with the NIH data sharing policy, is to follow the FAIR principles. meaning your information, your data is findable. So it has keywords and it has a persistent identifier, making it possible for other people to find your data. Accessible, meaning it's easy to retrieve. This means that it's in a data repository. It's not on your laptop in your office. Interoperable. So it's shared in formats that are open source, or not proprietary, and a consistent, standardized vocabulary whenever possible, so that your data can be combined with other data and easily understood. And reusable, meaning it's stamped with a clear reuse license and has proper documentation. So the NIH isn't the only funding institution getting in on data management and sharing mandates. Most of the federal funders at this point require them. Private funders are also starting to require them, and sometimes home institutions require them as well, although UB does not have a mandate as of right now. So what goes into an NIH data management and sharing plan? So this is the policy that went into effect in 2023. It requires that as part of your grant application, you have a data management and sharing plan. And the NIH requires that researchers discuss the 6 elements, which I'll go over next, around how they will manage and share their data. The expectation is to maximize data sharing with caveats. Those caveats are often things like privacy reasons for human subjects data. Sometimes it is patent issues with proprietary compounds. So the expectation is that you will share all of your data. There are always reasons not to, and we'll get into that. So the expectation is that your data are of sufficient quality to validate and replicate research findings. Some things for like training grants, fellowships, conferences, those don't need to share your data. But the key thing to keep in mind is that your data is expected to be shared at the either when you publish on that data or at the end of your grant period, whichever comes first. Meaning, yes, if you do not publish on your data, if you have negative findings, you don't find anything, you are still expected to share that data. You collected it on NIH funds, you must share it.
Jocelyn, there's a question.
Yes, yes, I see it now. It says, is there a DMSP template? And what are the limitations regarding IRB compliance? Yes, there absolutely is a template. I'm going to share a template as well as an online tool for creating these. As far as the IRB limitations, when you are submitting to the IRB, you should have a data management plan ideally already created, because you will have to tell the IRB what you plan to share. If it's human subjects data, you will have to detail how you are going to de-identify and anonymize that data, and what safety precautions you will have in place when you share that data. So the two definitely go hand in hand. And when we get to the 6 elements, you'll see where that comes up as well. So these are the 6 elements. Number 1, data type. You're going to give a brief explanation of what type of data you are collecting. Related tools, software, or code. Again, if you have a certain software that you use, a certain piece of equipment that generates data for you, or if you are generating code to analyze your data or collect it, this is where you won't include your code in the data management plan, but you will describe it. A data management and sharing plan is ideally only 2 pages long. So they do not need your entire study protocol. In fact, they do not want it. They want brief descriptions of the data you are collecting and how you are going to share it. So data standards is where you describe any sort of data standards that you might be using. For example, like if you're familiar with CDISC or the NIH's Common Data Elements, those are data standards. Every discipline will have its own data standards that they typically use. Sometimes the repository where you're going to share your data requires a data standard, but it's also acceptable to say, hey, we don't have a data standard, but this is how we're going to ensure that our data is well documented. That can also be acceptable. Data preservation, access, and associated timelines. This is where you say what repository you're going to put it in, and we'll talk about choosing repositories, how it's going to be accessed, and when you are going to share it. Again, that either has to be when your publication comes out or the end of the grant. Access, distribution, and reuse considerations. Will the access to your data be restricted? Ideally, it should not, but like I said, there are always cases where it's going to be necessary. The other thing, now that I think about this, considering the IRB, one of the most important things to consider when you are talking to the IRB and completing your IRB application is your informed consent documents. If you are required to share your data, you must put that language into your informed consent documents, because if the patient has signed an informed consent that does not include that you are going to openly share anonymized data, you cannot share your data. So if it's not already in your informed consent that's approved by your IRB, you cannot fulfill this obligation. So that's something you need to plan for from the start. Reuse considerations, we'll talk about the licenses that you can put on your data that determine what other researchers can do with your data. And then oversight of data management and sharing. This is where you describe who will be ensuring that this data management plan is followed, and what kind of timeline they will be working on. So speaking of templates, I know this is small. I will share these slides when I'm done. And this is actually embedded right in here, so you can click on this to look at a full document of all of these pieces. I'm going to talk about the DMPTool, which is an online tool for creating a data management plan. A lot of people prefer just to do it here in a Word document template. Whichever you prefer is fine. This template in particular has little descriptions of exactly what should be included in each element. We see some prompts again here for the data type and what kind of information should be included here. It can be really easy to put too much information in here, but remember, they don't need your study protocol. They need brief summaries of what you are collecting. All right, and let's talk a little bit about the DMPTool. So the DMPTool is a free online application managed by the California Digital Library that helps researchers create data management plans specific to their funders' requirements. It's not just for NIH, although that's kind of how it got its start. It actually has templates if you're doing, for the National Science Foundation or other funders, you'll find different templates inside the DMPTool. So again, it's a web-based tool that provides a click-through wizard for creating your data management plans, and it offers advice along the way, and I'll show that in a moment. It's used by many institutions around the world, and it has funder-specific templates. So let's take a look at that real quick. I had it open. There we go. All right. So this is the DMP tool. Let me see if I can go back to the home page or if it's just going to leave me here. You can log into, no, it's just going to leave me here. All right. So yours might look a little bit different because I'm the administrator on this, so I have some extra stuff on here. DMPTool.org, you can log in using your UB credentials. So anything you create within the DMP tool will be associated with UB. And when you create a plan, so the button for create a plan is up here. Again, this is fairly self-explanatory, but if you need more support with using the DMP tool or anything really to do with creating your data management plan, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to walk you through this process. So this is just a sample data management plan that I created just for demonstration purposes, but it collects basic information about your project. You can put in who your funder is, and this will therefore give you advice based on the NIH's requirements. You can add collaborators. So obviously most people don't do this kind of research alone. So you can add anybody on your team here as a collaborator, and they will be able to, and you can decide if they're a co-owner, editor, or read only. And then you can jump into creating your plan. So again, it's going to be a text box with some prompts as to what to put in there. Some examples down here. We have a fill in the blank prompt that can be helpful, and some sample answers. Over here on the right is going to be general NIH guidance on what to put into this box. Then if you click on the UB tab, that's where I have put my own advice in there for you all that is specific to UB. And then the DMP tool itself has guidance as well. You'll also see over here for comments. Any of your collaborators can put comments in there. Also, at the end of this process, it will give you the option of having your data management plan reviewed. If you click that box, it will send a prompt to me and give me access to your data management plan for me to review, and I will put any comments or suggestions in that same comment field there. All right, so every element of the data management plan has its own box here. I'm going to jump right down to the bottom. All right, just a warning for the oversight of data management and sharing section. A few things. You will see examples of data management plans out there on the internet. Oftentimes, departments will share them with each other as almost a template, which is fine. I think that's a really great way to understand the process and what is expected. Be careful with this last element, because you will see lots out there that say, oh, our data services librarian will manage our data management. And I will not. I am but one person in a two-person department. So I am so happy to review your data management plan and give you advice, give you trainings on anything you might need data management related. I do not have the authority or capacity to manage your data. So I always recommend that for this section, you identify somebody on your team, either specifically by name or by role, and say, this is who will be managing the data, and this is the timeline, and this is the process that they will use to ensure that we are complying with this data management plan. That said, ultimately, the PI is the person who is responsible, who will be held responsible for complying with this data management plan. All right, going back up here, you can share your research outputs. Request feedback. There we go. So this is where you can click this button. It will be sent to me where I will be able to review your data management plan. And I can usually, depending on my schedule, but I usually promise those within 2 days because I know a lot of times these are done last minute, which I understand, but keep that in mind, ideally 2 business days. So here on Finalize, something to keep in mind, one of the things that the NIH is encouraging is the use of persistent identifiers. Persistent identifiers are unique codes assigned to people, to publications, and to data sets. And so our repository is going to assign a persistent identifier to your data set. Hopefully you have an ORCID, which is the persistent identifier for people, and I'll go over these in later slides. You can also get a persistent identifier for your data management plan, and it's called a DMP ID. If you put it into the DMP tool, you can then create an identifier for your DMP, which makes it easier to include it on your CV, include it on your ORCID profile, link to it in your publications. It's super useful for helping other people find your documentation. And then finally, the last tab here is download. It's slow today. You can download your data management plan in different formats. And keep in mind, you can fuss around with the formatting a little bit if you want to. I said that the data management plan should be a 2-page document. That is what the NIH says, is that it must be a 2-page document. Again, that's because they want it to be brief. I got clarification from the NIH that you will not be rejected if your data management plan is longer than 2 pages. In fact, and the reason I had to clarify that is because the DMP tool often creates a plan that is a little bit, maybe 3, sometimes 4 pages. And that is fine as long as you are meeting that goal of being brief with your answers. It's just a matter of formatting and how the tool generates the document that it sometimes ends up being longer. All right, any questions about the DMP tool before I move on to our next item? And again, if anything comes up. Yes, absolutely. I'm just reading the question here. Is it necessary to state who will be the data manager? It can be open-ended. And like I said, oftentimes it's going to be a role. Say our graduate student will, or someone else on the team, you can put a role or a title, that is fine. Or you can say, yes, we will assign these duties to a member of our team and this is what they will do. That is acceptable, yes. All right, great question. I'm going to jump back to my slides, but if anything else comes up, just pop that in the chat. All right. So why would you use the DMP tool? Like I said, a lot of people prefer just to use that Word template, and that's fine. Some advantages of the DMP tool, again, it has all that guidance built into it. It gives me an easy way to give you feedback. I am also happy to review a Word document. It gives you the chance to view other example plans. So it gives you the choice of sharing your plan publicly. So you can choose to do that. But more importantly, you can go and look at other people's plans. And oftentimes that's the best way to start, is to find a data management plan for a project that's similar to yours and use that as a starting point. The NIH also has several example plans that they share on their website. I'm happy to find some of those for you that I think would be a good fit. And those are also a great place to start. Because it can be a little daunting to think like, I've got this huge study protocol. How am I going to, narrow this down to a couple sentences? And they've got really good examples of how other researchers have done that. The DMPTool makes your data management plan machine actionable, basically making it so that it's easily read by computers, and allows for some automation to the updates of your data management plan. And you can connect it to your ORCID ID, which we are going to talk about shortly. All right, so we already looked at that. So persistent identifiers, like I said, you have a persistent identifier. Hopefully you have an ORCID ID. Your article will have a DOI, which stands for Digital Object Identifier. Your data management plan, if you've created the DMPTool, will have a DMP ID. And then your data will also have probably a DOI, although that will depend on your repository. So hopefully you all have an ORCID ID. And yes, saying ORCID ID is repetitive or redundant because it's built right into the word. So what is an ORCID ID? It's a free account that creates a persistent identifier that will follow you throughout your career. It allows you to put all of your scholarly work in one place. It allows you to fulfill the White House Office of Science and Technology policy of needing a persistent identifier, which they changed last year. The initial rule was no later than the end of 2025, but they changed it last year to be immediate as opposed to the end of 2025. So either way, just know that you need to have one, and the ORCID ID is the only one that currently fulfills the requirements of the NIH. So it's required for many grant funding systems. It's required for the DMPTool. It's required for most repositories. So if you have not created one, go to orchid.org. It will take you 30 seconds to create one. Spend a little time updating it with the research you've already done. You will not regret the time invested in that, because somewhere down the road, you will need to create an NIH biosketch. And that NIH biosketch can be automatically generated from your ORCID records. All right, so let's jump back out here and we can take a look at mine. So this is what the public view of an ORCID record looks like. I think that's the public view. Yeah, that's the public view. All right, so they have, the font on this is terrible. I don't know how they've gotten away with that being so unreadable. But I think that you have to highlight it to actually read it. But so it's basically all the components that are going to be in your CV is going to be where you work. So it links you to UB, where your education is from, different awards you've received, and then a list of your publications. So you can see here, I have publications in here, things like this. You can actually give publishers access to your ORCID. Oftentimes when they're about to publish something, they will request access, and therefore the publisher can automatically populate your ORCID record with your publications, which is pretty cool. This is an example of a record that I put on manually. Yeah, you can see like this. This was added by University of Toronto Libraries. This here, yeah, this is a good example here. So this is actually an example of a data set that I have shared publicly from one of my research projects. It's shared on OSF. and OSF generates DOIs for data sets, and so I have that listed on my ORCID as well. So this is what it looks like from the user side. That other one was the public side. This is the user side. You can go into each element and update it. You can also give people permission. If you have somebody on your team that you would like to give permission to update your ORCID, you can do that as well. Give them permission to go in and add in your publications and such. But again, especially just as such a useful tool for keeping all of your information in one place. And again, allowing your publishers to automatically update it, and eventually using it to create your NIH biosketch. It's also, keep in mind too, not an issue for me because my name is long and weird, but if you have a semi-common name, having a persistent identifier is super important for being able to distinguish your work from other people with the same name or similar names. All right, any questions about ORCID before we move on? All right, as anything comes up, just throw it in the chat. All right. Yeah, we don't need to look at that. Okay, on to Dryad. So we talked about the importance of data sharing. Where do you share your data? So there are going to be different options for sharing your data. Oftentimes that will depend on your grant. Your grant may specify what repository to put your data in, and that's great. It makes the decision for you. If your grant does not specify it, the next option is to look at discipline-specific repositories. Like I mentioned that those who study genomics are very used to this. They've been doing it for a long time now, and the NIH has specific genetic databases. So if that's your field of research, you will share that data in those discipline-specific repositories. Why does that matter? This helps with data access, with finding data. You want your data to be discoverable. One of the ways to make your data discoverable is by putting it into a repository for other scientists in the same field. So if you're studying genomics and you are looking for a data set, you know you can go to a genomics data set. If you are studying neurology and you are looking for a data set, again, you can go to a neurology repository and look for that data. But that said, there isn't always an appropriate repository for you to use, in which case you will need a generalist repository. Generalist repositories are open repositories that take any type of data. And there are many of them. Again, I can share some resources, and I'll share our Research Data Services website at the end here, which has all of that information there. There are many generalist repositories. At UB, we have a membership to one called Dryad. And so Dryad is a generalist repository. They take data from any kind of research, and they meet the requirements of the NIH. We have a Dryad membership, which can save you money on deposit charges, depending on how large your data set is. Also, and I should add this in here, Dryad offers data curation, and that is part of our membership with Dryad. Not all repositories offer data curation, and this can be a super important step to making sure that your data is accessible and reusable. So basically, if you submit your data to Dryad, a curator with Dryad will review your data, review your metadata, your documentation, and ensure that they are complete. and they will have a dialogue with you back and forth, making sure that your data is complete, your documentation has everything that it needs, and that everything makes sense as a whole data set package, and then they will publish it on Dryad. Dryad also then creates a DOI for your data set to make it easy for citation and access purposes. So Dryad is not always going to be the most appropriate repository for you to use. And when you get to the point where you need help selecting a repository, please reach out to me. I've got lots of resources on how to find the right repository for your data. Although we have a membership to Dryad, it's not always the right one. So all personally identifiable information for human subjects research must be properly anonymized. Thinking back to your data management plan, keep in mind that they will want, just like the IRB, they will want to know how you plan to de-identify and anonymize your data. Data in Dryad must be shared with what's called a CC0 license. A CC0 license is a Creative Commons license, which is a common format for sharing data sets. A CC0 basically gives up any rights to your data. It means that your data will be openly shared and it can be reused by anybody for any purpose. Now, this is the spirit of Dryad. This is the spirit of open data. It might not be appropriate for your data to use it that way. You might not want to, say, open up to people using your data for commercial purposes. So keep that in mind when you're deciding on what repository you want to use. Make sure that you are comfortable with a CC0 license. If you are not, there are lots of other options. And of course, you will need your well-documented metadata that describes your data set. You will need a code book or a data dictionary, probably a README file describing exactly what's in your data set. And then a data dictionary saying, this table has this many fields, and this is what each field is labeled. This is what is acceptable for each field. Again, when you get to that point, when you need to document your data, I'm always happy to help. Dryad does have curators, which is part of the reason we are subscribers, but I'm always happy to do a first pass at your data set to make sure that the documentation is complete. Again, reasons for using Dryad. If you need to open share, it's a great option because we're a member. You can save money. It's not always free, and this is something to consider too. When you are doing your grant application, you need to decide on a repository, figure out if that repository is going to cost you anything, and factor that into your budget when you apply for the grant. Data curation, mentioned that. Openly encourages others to build on your science. Having that DOI for your data set increases your citations, which is, again, always good for your career and such. And you can link to it with your ORCID account. Oops. All right, so let's take a quick look at Dryad. All right, so this is the homepage for Dryad. You can also log into Dryad using your UB credentials. It requires your ORCID. It kind of sends you around in a circle here. All right, since I'm already logged into ORCID, it's going to already log me in, which is fine. All right, let's see. I'll just do a quick search. We can look at what a data set looks like once it's in Dryad. All right, so here's an example of what a data set looks like once it's in Dryad. This is all of the metadata that will be collected and curated before before it is shared publicly on Dryad. So you have the title of your data set, your authors. Often people will just use the title as the same title as whatever publication you might have had. And then here you can see these are the actual data files. There is a CSV file, which is going to have the tabulated data that they collected. And then there's a README file, which has the documentation about what is in that CSV file. They require an abstract. Again, this is usually the same abstract as whatever article you might have published. This is the contents of what's in that README file. So Dryad actually takes the README file and then includes it as part of the record here for easy access. You can read exactly what's in there about the file structure. Again, like I said, the variables and what they have collected. Access and sharing information, code and software. You can read about the methods. This is all stuff that was in the README file. And then lastly, here we have a link to the publication that was created, was written based on this data set. All right, so this is fully accessible. I can just click on this and it will download it, and I can take a look at that data. There are other repositories that allow for things like restricted access, which people are, usually familiar with. There's the old practice of putting the line at the end of your article saying, hey, if you want to see my data, email me and I'll send it to you. Or email me and we'll set something up so we can transfer it. That's, traditionally how people share data. The NIH's policy does not want that. They want true accessibility. And for true accessibility, you need to have it shared openly in a repository like this with proper documentation. I'm just reading the chat right now. So I don't know the answer to that first part about core facilities. I do know that if you are acquiring a data set that requires a data use agreement, oftentimes restricted data, such as human subjects data, requires that you sign a legal document about what you will do with that data and how you will store it securely. Anything needing a data use agreement, you're going to go to sponsored projects for. They handle those. And does Dryad have limits as to the size of the data sets to be stored? Yes, it does. Yes, and you can find that in their documentation. There are limits on how big the individual files can be. There are limits to how big the total project can be. And then there are also options for purchasing extra space if you do need more space. Right. Any other questions about Dryad? All right, I want to go quickly. Actually, I don't have it linked on here. So this is our data services website. You can see here all of the services that we offer, including data discovery. If you are looking for data sets for analysis, we can help you with that. We teach a lot of workshops throughout the semester on different data management tools and techniques. So you can find all of that information here. Yes, Wade, to answer your question, absolutely, you are correct. You are correct that Dryad is not suitable for large data sets that contain images and sequencing data. There are UB/SUNY solutions coming down the pipeline. They are not available yet. What other researchers with those large types of data sets have had to do is do things like purchase space through various cloud storage vendors. And I can't say that I'm an expert in that process. Usually other people in your department will know more information about that than I can offer. But I'm also happy to do any research into it that anybody might need. But that is a correct assessment, that for really large data sets like that, Dryad will not work. And Scott, does either the CC0 license or Dryad system itself provide protection against third-party companies scraping data sets? No, it does not. In fact, the CC0 license says it's okay to do that, which is why a lot of people will hesitate to use it. There are other Creative Commons licenses that do put restrictions on what can be used, your data can be used for, but if you need to use a different type of license, then you will also need to use a different repository. Okay, any other questions? All right, I mentioned this is clunky, but anyway, so like I said, that's our Research Data Services website. You can also link to it here. We have these workshops coming up this semester. In fact, I'm doing the Tidy Data Principles at noon today. Unix Shell, OpenRefine, R in RStudio. We're also going to be doing a Power BI workshop later in April. And here's my information. You are welcome to reach out to me at any time. Any questions about anything we talked about today, anything data management related, selecting repositories. I didn't get really into how to select a repository, but I'm happy to walk you through that process and give recommendations as to what repositories would be appropriate for your data.
You could go ahead with your question.
Yes, go ahead,
I
Shamshad.
have two scenarios. One scenario is I have external research investigators who wish to share data with me at UB. And so what typically happens is we describe that study in CLIC to get IRB approval. And one of the things that we are required to do in CLIC is conflict of interest certification together with data user agreement.
Mm-hmm.
I can't recall ever a situation where CLIC says, so what's your data sharing plan? I believe that's part of the CLIC protocol, because in the CLIC form, they have HRP 503, where you are asked to describe your data management plan. So my first question is, it seems like the data sharing plan is a separate, one simple 2-page document. And is that an overlap of CLIC's policy? Because we already have to submit a sort of simple data management plan within the IRB submission.
Right.
That's one case. The other scenario is going the other direction. I want to share data with someone external of UB. And so what do I need to do? Because they would have to then, the project is on their end. All I'm doing is sharing the data. They would have to get IRB approval on their side, their institutional approval and so forth. But what do I need to do from my side?
I believe that for your second scenario there, the process would start at their end, where they would initiate a data use agreement. And that's, again, where sponsored projects would come in. They handle those kinds of legal documents about what other researchers can use your data for. And you're absolutely right that it will, this data management and sharing plan will overlap with what you have in CLIC, and it will overlap with IRB. It will contain similar information. So again, it's all about that planning process at the beginning of the project, saying, this is how I'm going to handle the data. In fact, if you are using data from another researcher for a new project, you will want to ensure that you include that in your data management plan. Because you probably won't be sharing that data, right? If it comes from someone else, or if it's already openly shared, you're going to say, hey, I'm using a secondary data set. I won't be sharing it at the end of this project, that sort of thing. But yes, a lot of these different processes and documentation do overlap. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. I'm just wondering why it is I have not been asked for a data sharing plan in IRB. You know, it seemed like so I'm wondering if did I miss something, or maybe I got through something by error, you know?
No, I don't think, as far as I know, IRB will not ask for a separate plan. It's just that information and that process is often shared, in different parts of your application to IRB. Yeah, but as far as I know, they don't ask for a plan like this that you submit to NIH.
And the data sharing plan, who executes that? I mean, who would have to sign off? Is there an execution of a document where you sign off, or is just a plan? Hey, here's a plan. It's a Word document. That's what we're going to do.
Yes.
Right? Okay.
It is a promise. It is a promise. It is you telling the NIH that I will fulfill this duty to share this data at the end of my project. There is no one currently at UB who will check up on you to make sure that it is done. It is, again, the PI's responsibility. The funder reserves the right to come back and make sure that you've done it. And there are, potential penalties if it has not been done, such as having, funding removed. That said, in the 3 years since this has been in place, I do not know of any examples where that has happened. A lot of this currently is running on, an honor policy.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Are there any other questions? Okay, well, it seems like there are not any other questions, so we want to say thank you to everyone that attended, and a special thank you to Jocelyn for presenting today. Really appreciated. Whenever you have the slides, if you want, you can send them to me. I can put them in PDF, and then I can send them out to everyone once the recording's ready in about a week or so.
Sounds good. I'll get those to you right away.
Great. Thank you.